This is
the Bottom Bins Podcast.
Oh,
Hello and welcome back to the Bottom Bins Podcast. This is a special episode, still part of our Premier League coverage, but we just thought we would take the early lookings on from the season and we would just give you one thing that each of us collectively have learnt from the Premier League teams in this early portion of the 2023-24 Premier League. So lads, we're just going to start with Man City. The general point here for Manchester City is no De Bruyne, no problem. And the reason I say that is because Julian Alvarez has managed to step up in such a big way for this Manchester City side that really they look to be playing their fluid self. Notorious slow starters in the Premier League, but they've won 4 from 4. Absolutely flying at the minute. And a big reason for that is to the goal contributions of Julian Alvarez. So, Oren, coming to you first. Alvarez obviously stepping in for De Bruyne. It's not really a like-for-like replacement, but it's like-for-likes in terms of the goal contributions overall, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and in that sense of the word, yeah, 100%. If there's one thing that Julian Alvarez does guarantee you, it's goals, and obviously we've seen that last season with Man City, and you know we've seen his numbers with River Plate for the last couple of seasons as well. You know, this is a player who literally last season won everything you could win, including the World Cup. So his contributions have been absolutely phenomenal to not just his club but also his country. Seeing him step into De Bruyne's kind of like calm position was surprising for me actually as well. I expected to see Phil Foden start there mostly, but you know Pep does prefer Phil Foden out in the wing, and then you know Jack Grealish is playing probably some of his best football in a City shirt as well between the back end of last season and the start of this season. So the depth and quality at City is ridiculous, and we already knew that, but yeah, it's been absolutely fantastic, especially for City fans. Not too great for United fans to see Julian Alvarez doing so well, especially when he was linked to United under Ralph Rangnick. But look, again, just to go back to the point, you know, De Bruyne and Julian Alvarez, you wouldn't exactly put them both on the same pedestal, but Julian Alvarez is really, really shutting up his critics.
Big time, Warren. Completely agree with you. Just a really, really interesting kind of player. And I completely agree, Warren. I don't think 10 was the position that I ever saw Julian Alvarez occupying in a Manchester City shirt. But, I mean, he is doing it better than most at the minute. And I mean, it was interesting that you brought up Phil Foden there, Owen. It really does sort of raise a bigger issue, I think, with Man City supporters, especially online, and I've seen quite a lot of it. You know, the drop off that Phil Foden has seen, really from he scored the hat trick at against Manchester United last season. He was out then with I think it was a flu or something, and then he ended up getting injured and was out for a large period of time. And it seems as though his stock at Manchester City has really lowered, and the minutes have been quite reduced for Phil Foden. So Connor, I think the question coming to you then is Foden or Alvarez, which do you prefer?
Oh, they're both quality players. Even like Foden, he played against Newcastle, got man of the match. You can see the quality that he possesses. I think they can both play in the same team. I think they're both, future world class. They're probably nearly world class, but just a bit more consistency and a few more years. But as I said, Alvarez last game, 3 assists, a goal. He stood up for City last year as well. Anytime they needed him, he can play on the wing. He can play in that 10 position. But like as you said, like City losing De Bruyne, obviously for most teams, if you lose your star player, it's going to be a tough season. But City's depth is just incredible. They've lost Mahrez, Laporte, Gundogan, and they've brought in Kovacic, Doku, and then obviously Foden, and Alvarez has stepped up, and they brought in, and like just so many players stepped up for them, even at the back. And I was just going to say, like, they just look unstoppable. They've won 5 titles in 6 years, and I think Foden will have a massive season this year, and I think Alvarez will have a massive season this year. And we're kind of talking about, did it depend too much on Haaland for goals? And I don't agree with that. I think they just get goals from everywhere, like even Grealish, Silva, just a top quality side. And just again, they look unstoppable.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is their best start to a Premier League season, and I think it was either 4 or 5 years, and you can really see the evolution of their football now. They've unlocked how to play with Haaland, and it's a scary proposition that that faces many of the Premier League teams this year, knowing that you have to go and play Man City, and it's not a task that I envy of any player trying to stop Alvarez, Foden, Haaland, Grealish, Doku. I mean, the list goes on, really. So we're going to move it on. Going to go to Arsenal then, lads. Look, hasn't been the perfect start from Arsenal, but a win against Manchester United just before the international break, I'm sure, will have been music to a lot of Arsenal fans' ears. The point that I'm making here and that I want us to discuss, lads, is that inversion of fullbacks is becoming such a massive part of the way a team's set up now. And Arsenal, in the first 3 games of the season, experimented with Partey playing at right back and looking to invert. When that switched to Zinchenko on Saturday, against Manchester United, and the inversion was coming from the left as opposed to the right, Arsenal looked really to be back at their best. So, Oren, question to you simply is, Partey invert or Zinchenko invert?
I don't think it's a very fair question, to be 100% honest. I think Zinchenko's played his whole career as a left back. Do you know what I mean? So it's not exactly a direct comparison. I think it was more of an experiment because, we're seeing it with Trent Alexander-Arnold more in the Liverpool team, going into midfield. And, we see it in City's team as well, that the fullbacks near enough become extra midfielders. And I just think that, with Ben White carrying that little injury at the start of the season, I know he was fit to play, but, Arteta was experimenting throughout pre-season with Partey and right back, and it paid off for them a wee bit. And then obviously him being a natural defensive midfielder, it kind of did make sense for the way they were going to play, because it did feel, and I still do kind of feel, and I know a lot of Arsenal fans feel based on their social media, that Arteta is really, really trying to do everything to fit Havertz into the team. And I know that a lot of people aren't impressed with Havertz so far. Look, it doesn't surprise me, to be 100% honest. I've never rated Havertz, and I didn't think he was a good fit for Arsenal either. But they're trying to get Havertz into that 10 role as well, and playing him there as well as Odegaard, it means he kind of has to drop deeper, and there just seems to be quite a bit of favouritism, and I think it goes along with the £65 million price tag that they did pay for him. But that would kind of be my only argument to it. I think that this inversion of right backs, and they're changing their style, especially at the back, has really came to try and complement Havertz's abilities in the Arsenal team. It just hasn't worked just yet. However, I think we could be talking about a major success story in the same sense if Jurrien Timber was still fit. And it just seems to be the way that Arteta seems to be going for this season, and it is a shame for Arsenal and for Arsenal fans that Jurrien Timber got injured, because it did look like he was going to have a really, really big season, and he still could, but it did halt their progress at the start of the season. But yeah, in terms of a comparison between Zinchenko and Thomas Partey, I don't think there really is one to be made, in my opinion.
Well, it wasn't so much a comparison between the players as just to the tactical system, in the sense that, a lot of teams do tend to invert from the left as opposed to inverting from the right. I mean, the example you brought up there, Oren, of Liverpool, of course, they invert from the right, and that's solely down to trying to eliminate those weaknesses within Trent's game. Zinchenko, of course, was come through Man City's academy as a midfield player. He probably is a lot more comfortable on the ball. That much is obvious when you watch Arsenal. But Connor, look, again, just touching on this whole idea of inversion, do you see inversion being the way that Arsenal will target how they want to play under Arteta? Is that sort of becoming even from, say, last season, is that starting to become the sort of predominant play style that Arsenal wish to adopt, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Another thing with Zinchenko is he hasn't been fit. He can't stay fit. He's very injury prone. I think he starts in the Arsenal team every game if he can stay fit. I think the Partey one, he, like, Arteta obviously loves Partey, and I think he just wants him in the team, so that's why he plays him in that right back position, plays in that inverted role. The Havertz one, I don't understand why they don't play Partey in midfield, drop Havertz, play Declan Rice further up the pitch, and then have Odegaard as well. I don't understand that one. Maybe it is the price tag, 65 million. That's the kind of thing I was going to push at. I was kind of thinking, like, I know Arteta, I've talked really well about him, and great manager, but I think he's kind of getting in his own way, making these kind of weird changes, playing Kiwar and left back, and dropping Gabriel, who I think is a good defender, and he was back in the team against United and played well. So strange, and I think Arteta. If you look at the results, they conceded in 3 of the 4 games. United, they were lucky enough to win. They dropped points against Fulham at home. I've seen their clean sheets. They've kept 4 clean sheets in their last 23 Premier League games. I think they have kind of got lucky with a few results, and I think Arteta just needs to realise what his best team is, and I don't think Havertz in that team is the right way. I think Zinchenko in the team, brilliant player, needs to be in the team. I think Ben White, a right back, is a better choice than Partey because he offers more going forward as well. And I think putting Partey into midfield, playing Declan Rice further up the pitch, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one at Arsenal in the sense that, Declan Rice came out in an interview and said that he feels more comfortable playing at the 6, which was quite strange because we did all, in our pre-season predictions, we kind of all thought that, Rice was actually going to come in and play the Xhaka role, whereas we've seen Havertz do that. And look, boys, I'm in total agreement with both of you. Havertz is pants, to be honest. And he was when he played for Chelsea, and he is still now that he plays for Arsenal. And I think Arsenal are sort of hand-tied here because they paid 65-70 million for him, and you're not going to pay 65 or 70 million and then just drop him to the bench. I think they are trying to find out a way that complements him in the system, and it's obvious that they just haven't found the correct system that suits that as of yet. But look, that's not here nor there. Moving it on to Spurs then, lads. So the general point that I have down for Tottenham Hotspurs this season is that Postecoglou had already planned for the departure of Harry Kane. Yes, it was very last minute. It was on the eve of the Premier League starting, of course, when Harry Kane was finally given the green light to move to Bayern Munich. In interviews since then, Ange has publicly come out and said that he already had an inkling that Harry Kane was going to leave the club. The feeling around the club was that Kane wanted the move and was pushing for the move. So, Oren, with all that being said, Spurs have actually started the season really, really well. And I think, myself and yourself, we had Spurs finishing quite highly this season in our predictions. I know you didn't get to make them on the bottom bins, Oren, but even just conversations amongst ourselves, we had very high hopes for Ange and very, very high hopes for Spurs. So do you think that Harry Kane not being there has maybe allowed Ange to start afresh and maybe build something that we hadn't previously seen at Spurs before?
Yeah, I would agree with that to sentiment as well. Don't get me wrong, I think, obviously, and I know everybody thinks if you have Harry Kane in that Spurs team, it does make them better, obviously. He's one of the best strikers in the world, if not the best. But I do feel like it's a bit of relief for maybe some players, not necessarily that they don't get to play with Harry Kane or that Harry Kane's gone and that burden's gone. Not that there was a burden. I mean more so that, more players are probably going to get a chance to express themselves. I would say that in a lot of teams, I know, just going back to quite an old enough, an example when Robin van Persie was at Manchester United, players have come out and said since that, Rio Ferdinand never were saying, Sherlock said, get the ball to him. Doesn't matter what you do, just get the ball to him. He'll do the work. And I would say that was very much Spurs' system for the last 6 or 7 years, to be 100% honest. But now I think that these players are going to be allowed to play the football that they were signed for, the likes of Yves Bissouma, who was one of Brighton's best players 2 years ago, signed for Spurs. Looked like his career was already away at Spurs. And I would say a lot of people didn't see him staying at Spurs beyond this summer. However, Ange came in and worked his magic or whatever and had conversations with him. He came out the other day and said that he told Bissouma that he sees him as a real leader in the Tottenham squad, and we're seeing that in his performances now as well. And Ange's system is just a really good system. Like I said it before, whenever he was managing Celtic, it did not once occur to me that Spurs would not improve under Ange Postecoglou. I thought it was a brilliant appointment that they didn't go for the star name per se, but they went for somebody that would match their style of football. And he's getting the best out of some players. Papa Sarr, whose confidence was kind of shot towards the end of last season, and now he's starting alongside Bissouma and putting in great performances. Got the goal against Manchester United. I think the star that we're all kind of talking about, especially in fantasy, is Destiny Udogie at left back. He has been absolutely phenomenal for Spurs. And even their goalkeeper, Vicario, I had never heard of the fella whenever he signed for Spurs, and I was thinking, I've seen some of your stats from the Italian league last year. You don't look great, but stats don't say everything, of course, and he's put in some really, really impressive performances. So yeah, I would say that Harry Kane's departure was well prepared by Ange Postecoglou, and I would say, obviously Spurs aren't exactly a spending club. They don't spend a lot of money, so I didn't see them going and replacing Harry Kane in the limited time frame that they had, even with the budget that they would have got from Kane. However, I do think it opens the opportunity for a lot more expression in the current Spurs squad.
Yeah, I agree. Very, very much in agreement. Connor, obviously, you were sort of the opposite opinion to me and Oren. You were quite concerned for Spurs before the season started. And look, I mean, we still are very early days here. We're only 4 games played before this first international break. But look, I think on these early judgings, Connor, you would sort of have to concede that, Postecoglou looks like the current system that he's playing, he is getting it right. And look, I know the criticism, they haven't played like unbelievable opposition yet. Like obviously the best team that they've beaten is Manchester United, but wait till they come up against a Liverpool or an Arsenal or a Man City. But look, have you been impressed in these early showings from Spurs thus far?
Yeah, definitely been impressed, and the way Ange sets the side up, it's really good to watch. Madison, Son getting a hat-trick last game, Basuma obviously saw some of the improvements in these players are to be seen. And I still, as I'm going to say, the point you made there, I do believe 4 games, it is very early on. They play Liverpool away and Arsenal away and Liverpool back to back, and that's when we're going to see how good Spurs really are. Again, games they have not won for years. I can't remember the last time they won at the Emirates. But we'll just have to wait and see. Even against United, I thought first half United dominated the game. Should have been 1 or 2-0 up. Could even have had a penalty. And I think that's a totally different game. Once they got the goal, they got the crowd up and they win that game, fair enough. But I still think you can get at them defensively. They beat Burnley, who are not good. They beat Bournemouth. They drew at Brentford. And then that United game, obviously they won. But I thought first half, they were kind of all over the place. And very lucky Bruno missed a sitter. The handball. There's a few incidences that went their way. But I think it's too early to see. I think I am surprised. If you told me they get 10 points from them games, I would have said nope. Because they're missing. I think Harry Kane's going to be a big miss, and I will see it towards the end of the season. We'll see it. And I think Spurs will drop off a bit. They'll probably finish a bit higher than I predicted. I think I predicted them like 9th. Maybe they'll come like 6th or 7th. But I still see flaws. And, they've got Brennan Johnson in. Richarlison struggling. We'll just have to wait and see with Spurs. I think it is too early. 4 games is too early.
It's maybe too small a sample size yet just to get a great judge on it. But I mean, look, the one thing you'd say is if you take 30 goals out of a team from one individual player, it's incredibly difficult to replace, and there's no point in saying otherwise. But I mean, from the small sample size we've seen, I think that Ange has actually done a very good job in being able to get 10 points from those particular fixtures. And I'm sure they're maybe looking at the Brentford game now and going, that was a game that we maybe could have pushed on in and possibly could have been sitting on a perfect record at the minute. But yes, look, like I said, too small a sample size, so we're just going to have to wait and see with Tottenham Hotspurs. So going then to our team, lads, to Old Trafford, United. The general point I have here is crisis of the right wing. News broke today that Jadon Sancho is going to be training on his own for the foreseeable. In my humble opinion, I think that's Jadon Sancho's career done at Manchester United. I think if showdown talks couldn't be resolved, then I don't think we're going to see him pull on a United shirt again, to be completely honest. Anthony, obviously, has these allegations up against him, so he has delayed his return. And now the only right wingers that we have at the club are Pellistri and Ahmad, and Ahmad's on the injury table till mid-October, if the doctor's reports are to be believed. So the only recognised right winger we have at the club that's available to play right now, guys, is Facundo Pellistri. So, Oren, how bad is this for Manchester United so early on in the season?
Look, I'm an optimist. Okay, so I know you're both gonna fucking laugh and disagree with something that I say here, but fuck it, I don't care. I'm an optimist. I obviously think we are so lacking in squad depth, especially in the forward line, and I have thought that for the last 3 or 4 years, so I'm not disagreeing with that in the slightest. Anthony and Jadon Sancho were both underperforming. I think over the last 2 years, I did think Anthony will come good, and I still do think Anthony will come good. I am optimistic about his United career. Jadon Sancho, I'm in full agreement with you, Connor. I think it's dead and gone. I think he had 2 seasons to prove himself. This was going to be the season that was make or break for him, and 4 games in, he's decided to fuck about, and it's already broken. In terms of Facundo Pellistri, we've seen glimpses of this fella. He's only played 8 games for United, but in those 8 games, he's impressed me every single game, and I would think it's fair to say that he's impressed both of you as well, because he has that raw talent, and he just goes at the defenders. He's not afraid of taking a man on, and I think we've lacked that at Manchester United since, really, to be 100% honest, since Rashford first broke into the team. And Garnacho, when he first broke into the team, and Garnacho now still does take wingers on, but I think the style of Manchester United slowly gets into our wingers, and that raw actual winger ability kind of goes out the window after a few months of rigorous training with the first team at United. And I don't like to see that, because we have seen Rashford's game change. I know the confidence was up last year and he was taking on wingers again, but a lot of the times we were seeing him do a couple of step overs and then pass it back to Luke Shaw. But I am looking at this with optimistic eyes. I think we'll actually be surprised against Brighton. I think we'll see Alejandro Garnacho starting the right wing. He came on in right wing there against Arsenal. It looked like he had won it. Unfortunately, he hadn't, but that's just the way the game went. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see him starting the right wing. However, personally, I would love to see Pellistri start, a regular for Uruguay. As I said, I've been impressed with all his performances, and I think his style of play and getting to the byline and cutting it back will really, really complement Rasmus Højlund's style of play. Højlund, sorry. He is one of them players who is in front of his man at all times. His movement is pretty good. And just from highlights, I can't say we've only seen him play for 50 minutes or something, or 40 minutes, whatever it was when he came on against Arsenal. But we've seen his ability as well in glimpses, and I think he will perform really well this season. And I think, arguably, hot take, I think if Facundo Pellistri starts in right wing, I think we'd see genuinely more goal contributions from Facundo Pellistri than we would have seen from Anthony or Sancho this season anyway. And the same goes for Ahmad. I think they're both wingers that know the style of play Manchester United is used to, which is getting to the byline, cutting it across for your striker.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with you, Oren, in the sense that I don't want to see Garnacho anywhere near the right wing, because I believe that takes a lot away from his game. Same as if you move Rashford over to the right wing. I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I also believe that Garnacho is much better off the bench. Not saying that he can't develop into a starter, because I do believe that Garnacho can become one of the best wingers in world football if he keeps going at the progression level that he's moving at. But I think if you move him or Rashford over to the right, you're just eliminating a big part of their game, which is the ability to get inside of the box and shoot across the goal, shoot across the goal from the left. So I don't want to see him anywhere near the right-hand side. I very much want to see Pellistri in on the right-hand side. Connor, look, just again, touching on this crisis on United's right wing. Look, United in total spent 50 million to secure the services of both Pellistri and Ahmad. And now with Anthony delaying his return and Sancho not going to be training with United anymore, could United see this 50 million sort of finally come good? These two players getting a chance in the first team to really sort of stamp down and say, look, you paid a lot of money for us, and now we're going to get the opportunity to pay you back.
Yeah, definitely. It's a great opportunity for the players. I think Ahmed would have definitely got his opportunities if he was fit. Obviously got injured at the wrong time, because he really impressed at Sunderland last year. Like, the Championship's not an easy league, and I thought he impressed. Pellistri, I think they could even play Bruno in that right wing position. I don't think it's his best position, but I can easily see Ten Hag playing him there, because he's done it so many times before. I would more look. I obviously the right wing position unlucky. Obviously, Anthony, not unlucky, but these things, like there's been situations, not Ten Hag's fault. I just look at the way United spent money in the transfer window, and I even look at like our centre backs. That's where I'm more worried, because we're sitting with Johnny Evans and Maguire the last game. Like, it's incredible, and like the money was spent on Mount. Obviously, the new strikers come in. We've got Reguilon and Evans. I'm really worried about Man United this season. I think the right wing position, obviously, because Sancho, what's happened to him, and Anthony is weaker. But I think there's so many issues in this team at the minute, and for Ten Hag to keep this all together, it's going to take an absolute masterclass, I think, for us even to get Champions League football again, because I don't know how he does it, because everything just seems to be going wrong at the minute. But hopefully one of the players steps up. I think Pellistri we've seen him, he's a really, really talented player. I think he can step up, and I hope Garnacho steps up and people step up in their absence. And obviously, as well as Owen was saying there, he can deliver a ball. And with the new striker, he is a target man. He's a big lad, and he's got pace as well. So it is going to be tough, but hopefully one of these young players can step up, because we'll have spent money on them, and the pressure's maybe off a little because they haven't got Anthony and Sancho there, and it's like a shot to nothing kind of thing.
Yeah, I do agree. Oren's just stuck in a message into our chat there saying Mount right wing. That was literally the point I was going to finish up on, Oren, to tell you the truth. I was going to say, when we mentioned Bruno there coming to the right, don't want to see Bruno anywhere near it because it takes away from his game. And Mason Mount, of course, I am in agreement with you here, Oren. I think if Mason Mount was fit, Ten Hag might actually look to go to a midfield three of, Casemiro, Amrabat, Bruno, and then Mount pushed over onto the right-hand side. I think that would have been a realistic possibility for United. And, some of Mount's best football at Chelsea was played on that sort of right mid area of the pitch. That was where he got those goal contributions from, was either playing on that wide right or wide left area. So I think that if he was fit, that would have been an interesting option that United definitely could have explored. But for the minute, I definitely would just like to see Pellistri get his chance in there. So going to move it on then, lads, to our better rivals, Liverpool. And the general point that I have here for Liverpool is that the midfield rebuild over the summer could return Liverpool to the top two in the Premier League. I know it's a bit ambitious to say, but I do believe that the areas that they needed to lock down, they have locked down. Gravenberch, Endo, they will do that Fabinho role. They will cover that defensive workload together. And I do stress together because I don't think either one of them can do it on their own. They have McAllister, they have Szoboszlai, both hit the ground running, really. Szoboszlai especially. I think Szoboszlai has been a phenomenal signing so far for Liverpool. So, Oren, question to you is, where do you see Liverpool finishing now that this midfield rebuild is complete?
I think it's kind of the same point that we made with Spurs. After 4 games, it is early days. I am in agreement with you that they needed to change the midfield, and they really, by Jovi, they have. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and I do think I fully agree in the sense that Endo and Gravenberch, that'll be a together partnership. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't know what Gravenberch's going to bring to Liverpool. I know he has the ability to be a fantastic player in years to come, but I think that a lot of Premier League fans might have their hopes up a little too high for Gravenberch. He was dubbed as the next big thing. He was being compared to Jude Bellingham before he went to Bayern Munich, and then he couldn't get a kick for Bayern Munich. This fella Endo, he's 30 years of age. And not that that's old by any stretch, but come to the Premier League at 30 years of age is a big ask of any player. And look, he has the best defensive numbers in the Bundesliga, I think, the last couple of years or something like that, or one of the best. So he's definitely a good player, and I'm definitely not taking that away from him. But the Premier League is a different ball game to the Bundesliga. Do you know what I mean? For both of them players. And then yes, Szoboszlai, he's been absolutely fantastic, and I know he came from the Bundesliga as well. He's been absolutely fantastic. Top 4, I think, is their goal. Obviously, they've been looking to push for a title again. I just think it might be a season too quick for them, because I can't see anybody beating Manchester City, to be 100% honest. But yeah, look, they made the improvements in midfield. I do feel that the majority of them were very attack minded, and they are lacking that proper defensive midfield structure, not necessarily defensive midfielder, but midfield structure that they were used to playing. But yeah, look, they've still got Thiago on the books and stuff as well, who looks like he'll be playing a bit part role at Liverpool for the next year or so. But I don't know, it's tough to tell with Liverpool. Personally, I think fourth would be a brilliant season for them, but because it's a long season, especially with Europa League games and stuff. And travelling in the Europa League is something that a lot of people don't take into account, travelling to all these different countries, So yeah, it's a long season, but top four, I would say, yeah, that's a realistic possibility.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I completely agree with you on Gravenbach. Oren, this was a guy who very highly touted at Ajax, was really sort of trying to establish himself as one of the world's most promising young midfielders, and he arrived at Bayern Munich at a time in Bayern Munich's history where I think when we look back on them, they only won the Bundesliga by a point. There's now questions over Leon Goretzka's future at the club. That was a real chance for Gravenbach to step in and take a shirt from an established international footballer and a renowned midfielder in European football. And he didn't quite do that. So I do think the question marks are there. Endo's not really a household name, but I mean, he has the stats to back it up as such. I mean, maybe this is Liverpool's answer to McFred. Maybe this is their new comedy partnership in midfield. Who knows? I mean, Oren's just pointed out in the chat there. Yeah, completely correct. I mean, Sabitzer, he was behind Sabitzer in the pecking order at Bayern Munich, and they eventually let Sabitzer go in and loan to Man United, and he still couldn't get a game for Bayern. So yeah, there's definitely question marks there. But like you said, Oren, they do have Thiago, they do have Bacecic still to come back from injury, and I do think he's a really promising player, to be honest. I really liked what I've seen from him so far. Connor, obviously the midfield was the biggest question mark of Liverpool in the summer, but now it seems as though the focus has shifted from the midfield, and it is now very much pressed firmly upon Liverpool's defence. I know I said we would stick to 1 point, but just quickly on Liverpool's defence, famous Dutch journalist come out this week and has quoted that he never rated Virgil van Dijk, and that he's not back to his best, and that he never was the best centre-back in the world. And that coming from a journalist from your home country is quite damning, to be honest. Look, would you say now, okay, that's midfield patched up for the minute, but defence is really the area that they're going to struggle this season?
Yeah, well, the first point I would make, never been the best centre back in the world. The man came second in the Ballon d'Or race and just missed out to Messi. I think maybe there's a bit of bitterness there. I don't know, because that is nonsense, because he was the best centre back, I think, for 2 or 3 years there in the world. I do think he has stepped back a bit. I think Robertson stepped back, and I think Trent as well has been exposed. But when you have that missing, that piece in front of you, as I'm saying, at number 6, Fabinho, who did a lot of the dog work and was protecting that back four brilliantly. When you lose that, and you only get Endo obviously has his stats, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. Is he gonna suit the Premier League? Is he gonna be good enough? But yeah, the defense is gonna be an issue. Obviously, Gomez stepped in the last game, and the won easily, kept a clean sheet. I actually know a few Liverpool fans, and they were kind of saying to me they actually play better without Van Dijk. That's how much he has went back. They said obviously he was a top player, but he has, since the injury, he hasn't been the same player, because there's stuff that he used to get away with. Just he's lost that yard of pace, I think, and it is costing him. But the one player I actually want to talk about is just Szoboszlai. I think he is the real deal, and he's only 22, and he was a missing piece for Liverpool. They're missing that number 8, a creative player who can score goals and set goals up. I know he hasn't got any assists so far, but I was just seeing he has 2 key passes per game, and he's one of their top dribblers as well. So I think he is an unbelievable addition, and we talked about him, I think, in the one of them transfer shows, how good he was in the Bundesliga, and I think he will be a top player for Liverpool if he can stay fit, because I know he's had a few injuries. But yeah, that is an issue actually at the back. I think Trent can get exposed. Robertson step back a bit. Van Dijk, he is the captain, so he is going to start, but Gomez and Kanate, and obviously they have Matip as well. You could, as the season goes on, you could see, it's crazy to think, but you could see Van Dijk see, it's hard. He's the captain. I can't see him being dropped actually. But I think he has stepped it back a bit. Even against Newcastle, that red card a few years ago, that no way he gives that tackle in. He gets there before him and he wins that ball. But he has stepped back. But I think that journalist, like saying he never was a top centre back, that's nonsense.
Yeah, no, I agree, Connor. That is absolutely ludicrous from that journalist to say that. It's like you pointed out, like the man finished second in the Ballon d'Or race, like, and he's a centre back. You know, it's unheard of. It's unheard of. The one thing I will say about Van Dijk, boys, and I always look forward to this time of the year because you get excited because the new FIFA ratings are coming out, and you always get excited to see what your team ends up being rated in FIFA. And can I just say, this is a public message to EA. It's an absolute farce that Van Dijk is still rated 89 overall. Get out of it, would yous? Like, seriously, not a chance. Not a chance. 85 at best. And I'm being honest. I'm being generous, if I'm being honest.
But sure, like Neymar's 89. That's
Oh.
ridiculous as well. Like, it's some of the ratings. It's just because they're obviously like poster boys for the game, so they're obviously going to get high ratings.
Yeah, no, agreed. But sorry, Liverpool fans, if this does trigger you, but it is a farce that Van Dijk's still an 89 rated centre back because he's pants. Moving it on to Newcastle then. So the general point I have for Newcastle here, lads, is that the first game of the season fooled us all. Obviously started the season so brightly with that massive victory over Aston Villa, but haven't won a game since. And really what you would say is played Man City, played Liverpool. Yep, two of the hardest teams in the league. They're tough fixtures to play, but if we're being brutally honest, never really threatened Man City's goal. Should have seen the game out against Liverpool and didn't. And last week's performance against Brighton was just an absolute shambles. An absolute shambles from start to finish. So, Oren, general point to you then. Do you believe that first game of the season had us all fooled into thinking that Newcastle were this massive powerhouse in English football again?
Again, I think they're four of the hardest fixtures you can start with. Brighton is always a tough game, especially at the Amex. That's a really, really tough game. Aston Villa, off the back of a great season last year, really, really tough game. City and Liverpool speak for themselves. So I do feel like, their season kind of starts now. And I think getting 3 points was below par for Newcastle when you think about their season last year. Excuse me. So I'm not going to say it's not, but as you said, City, they only lost 1-0. There was no real chances in that game for either side, apart from the goal. It was actually quite a boring game when I thought it was going to be electric. Phil Foden was brilliant that game, though. He was absolutely fantastic. And then the Liverpool game, yeah, they should have seen it out, especially with Liverpool being in 10 men. They should have seen it out. Brighton, I know they lost. Was it 4-1, I think they lost?
No, 3-1.
3-1. I watched that game, and I remember saying to you straight away after it that it wasn't an entire reflection of the game, that scoreline. However, it's a results business in the Premier League. It's only going to get more difficult for Newcastle in terms of a season. But for the Premier League, I would say their next 3 or 4 fixtures, they have to win. They have to win to be back on that, chasing top 4 for this season. And that's just the way it is. There's no real margin for error, especially at the start of the Premier League. But Champions League starts next week. Newcastle in the Champions League for the first time in forever. So there's a lot more games going to be played for Newcastle this year. It's going to be a lot tougher. They did sign a few players, but in terms of squad depth for a Champions League squad, I'd say it is still lacking. And it will take a couple of years to get that, but whether they're still in the Champions League for a couple of years is a different story. So I would say the realistic possibility, especially with the improvements we've seen in the likes of Spurs and Brentford's still up there as well. And we've seen last year that the race for European places in general was really, really hot. But I would say fighting for Europa League is going to be Newcastle's target this year. And you never know, we could see Newcastle in the Europa League competition before the end of the year. So it is going to be difficult for them, but they are four difficult fixtures to start with, and it is early days. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 3 or 4 games, but they really should be winning the next 3 or 4 games if they have any ambition of getting top four again this year.
Yeah, definitely, Warren. Look, they are difficult fixtures, no doubt about that. But I mean, when you actually analyze the performances, like 3 games in a row, they recorded 4 shots. Only 4 shots in 90 minutes of football. And Connor, like when I made the statement that they fooled us all, me and you, were very, very hot on Isaac, very hot on Wilson. We really thought that Barnes had come in and was looking to be a quality player. Gordon had started the season fantastically as well, and these guys just haven't really produced since that first game, especially looking at Isaac. I mean, he's been taken off basically at just after halftime or at halftime in every game since the first game of the season. So does it worry you at all that, they're in the group of death of the Champions League? The PSG, Milan, Dortmund to contend with. And really, when you look at that squad on paper, I did make the joke during one of our transfer episodes that Howe was signing players as if he was still the Bournemouth manager, aside from Tonali. Does it worry you that games are coming thick and fast? They're playing some of the toughest competition in European football, and they just might be a little bit out of their depth?
Yeah, definitely. I kind of said that on the last podcast after uh, the loss to Brighton that defensively they're not good enough. You're starting Dan Burns and centre back who got exposed by Darwin Núñez in the previous game. They're playing boys like Matt Target at left back who couldn't get in the Villa side. Uh, Obviously, if you lose, they lost Batman, who is a really good centre back, and we've talked highly of him the last year or so. But if they lose one defender, they're in big trouble. Like Lascelles is the guy's looking at their bench. Like Lascelles, their only other real centre back, and no offense to Lascelles, but he's not good enough to play in a Champions League side. And
And
then
he's
you've got
sparking
Pope.
ways out on a night out.
Yeah,
He's getting in the
but
pub
also like
goals.
Pope.
Too many Jaeger bombs,
Pope,
that cunt.
he's a big lad. But Pope, he's also struggling. Like they've spent like their squads. I seen their squads in ninth most expensive in the world, and you wouldn't really think so when you look at the depth of it. They conceded a lot of goals. I would be really worried. Obviously we talked about Isaac and we talked him up. And we were saying he's going to get 20 plus goals, and he hasn't scored yet or since. So we jinxed him there. But Almiron, he played okay against Liverpool, but I'd be worried about him. Gordon, actually, he's been a bit better than I thought he would be. But yeah, if I was a Newcastle fan, I'd be very worried, especially with the games coming up. The depth isn't there, and I think Eddie Howe. I think if as you said about Europa League, if he gets Europa, he's going to get sacked. There's no way they're going to go. I think they'll go for a big name manager. Did they get off? That's the only thing. Last year, I seen it. The first 7 games only at 8 points and still got top 4. But the depth of the Premier League, the quality is a lot better this year, so they'll not get away with that. So I think if they're sitting about 8th or 9th, 16, 17 games in, I can see Eddie Howe getting sacked, which is crazy to think because he's done a great job, but I can see it because they'll want a big name manager.
Cutthroat business, the Premier League. There's no point in saying otherwise because it is, and that was a bit of a debate we had on our previous episode, guys. So if you want to see me and Connor debate about whether Newcastle might look to replace Howe or where the next step is for Newcastle, please go and give that episode a listen. Going to move it on then, lads, to our second last team, Brighton. The general point I have here is that UEFA Champions League qualification could be a real possibility for Brighton. Look, I think every football fan in the country and across the UK is under no illusions that Roberto De Zerbi probably will get a big job next summer. And I think really the interesting thing is if he was to push Brighton to say 4th, would he want to stay on there? You've got arguably the best recruitment department in world football, so that you're going to be able to churn out and find new prospective talents. The performance levels only seem to be getting better and better from Brighton. You have an 18-year-old Irish striker, Evan Ferguson, in there who is getting such high praise from people that are calling him a guaranteed world superstar. Oren, look, is that too bold a claim to make the Champions League is on the cards, or do you think maybe it's still a season too early for Brighton just yet?
No, I wouldn't say it's out of the realms of possibility. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think they will get Champions League this year. Um, However, they have two chances. You know, they're in the Europa League and they have the chance through the league as well. It's going to be difficult for them, of course, as we've said on multiple teams that we've talked about so far. The quality at the top of the Premier League is really, really high this year. I think we could all predict the three teams that are going to go down, to be 100% honest. I think towards the bottom of the table, you know, relegation's almost confirmed for three teams based off, you know, the first four games. And because I just don't think the teams that came off from the Championship are any quality whatsoever for the Premier League. But look, they could prove me wrong. I'm not going to say they couldn't. But in terms of Brighton, you know, it's not off the cards. We've talked about squad depth there with Newcastle. Brighton don't have the household names, but you don't have to have the household names of Brighton and Hove Albion because you know you just trust their recruitment at this stage. Like they've signed that fella from Lille, I think his name's Balaba or Bernaba or something.
Yeah, Balaba.
Balaba, you just know he's going to be absolutely fucking class. Do you know what I mean? Because they paid like 25 million for him, and Brighton don't spend big fees. So if they're spending a big fee, this boy's going to be a superstar. And then the likes of Ferguson, they've Joe Pedro, Matoma, their attacking depth, Solly March has been absolutely fantastic under De Zerbi. You know, I think they really have a good chance. And then they've Donny Welbeck in behind that as well, who I still think has still got it, especially in the bit part role that he will play at Brighton. You know, he's not going to start every game, but he will come into the team at times. And, you know, what a role model for Evan Ferguson to have in Donny Welbeck there, somebody who's, you know, won the Premier League. You know, he's done it at Arsenal, he's done it at Manchester United. He's been a journeyman in the Premier League as well. Great experience for a young striker like Evan Ferguson, who will only improve under that guidance as well. In terms of De Zerbi, we've already seen his influence in terms of transfers as well, with Ansu Fati coming in, having been heavily touted to go to Tottenham Hotspurs, who were flying high under Ange Postecoglou so far. So, you know, players in world football want to play for De Zerbi. The point about him potentially moving if they get top four, De Zerbi does have that tendency to move after a couple of years. He's quite like Conte in that sense. However, getting Brighton to the top four, I think it would depend on what job comes up. I don't think he would just jump at the next job that came. Like if that was Chelsea, if it was Potter, if it was the same situation as Potter, and Chelsea sacked Poch after a couple of games and they wanted De Zerbi, I don't think he's going. Do you know what I mean? I think it really will depend on the club that comes for him, and he'll have no shortage of clubs. But yeah, Brighton will be a force this season, and we know what to expect from Brighton now, especially in the Premier League. It's always going to be a tough fixture, both home and away. Man United will have their work cut out for them on Saturday. But yeah, I expect a big season for Brighton again this year.
Yeah, definitely, Warren. Definitely. I think you raised some really good points there. And it is going to be a really interesting one for Brighton this season. Connor, look, we've just talked about the host of talent. The thing I want to put to you is, you know, we've seen Southampton sort of have a similar model where they were always great at producing these talents, and you know they would really stamp their authority on the Premier League, but then Southampton would always sell them, and this model eventually got them relegated. This, you know, we produce the talent, we sell the talent for big money, and we're always looking for the next big thing that's going to make us 80, 90, 100 million pounds. Do you think it's more sustainable at Brighton? Do you believe that the world-renowned recruitment department that they have has enough to keep a project like this going in the long term?
Yeah, but it's going to come down to, you know, getting European football, because then you can keep these players and obviously sell them on for more money, because you're in a position. Premier League's in a different position these days as well, because it makes so much money off TV deals and stuff like that. Brighton can go spend money on players. They can keep players. Like we've seen it with Casado. They didn't just take the first offer. You know, it was like a bidding war and they got over 120 million for him. But they're such an exciting team, and I think, you know, De Zerbi is a top coach, and as we said, I think he's one of the best in the Premier League, if not the world, and the recruitment is off the charts, and some of the players he's even improved, like Gilmore, you know, Matoma's come in, Marsh, Veltman, like even Dunk, he played for England the other day, like he's a good player, good centre back. Milner's come in. They still have like boys like Lamptey, Lallana, good experience. It's a good blend. Obviously Ferguson, unbelievable talent, well back. Champions League will be tough, but if there's 5 positions and the way they're playing, there's always a chance. For me, it's just with Brighton, they do get caught out against some of the weaker opposition. Like West Ham aren't weaker opposition, but they get caught out against West Ham. They're the far better side, but they just got counter-attacked, and that would worry me. But they brought Veltman back in, and then they dropped Webster. And the next game against Newcastle, they were very, very good. So I think top 6, they got Europa League last year. If the 5th position comes in, it's definitely it's a possibility. They're 12 goals this season as well. The recruitment is just amazing, and I think a lot of teams are kind of lagging behind in that regard. But a lot of the recruitment will depend on keeping De Zerbi and getting European football, because if they keep De Zerbi and they get European football, they're just going to keep going from strength to strength.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the thing about Brighton is, and I will 100% stand by this comment, and this is no sense of bias in this comment whatsoever, but from Roberto De Zerbi has come in to the Premier League, Brighton have the highest XG of any Premier League team. And I know for a fact, lads, that if Man City were on the TV and Brighton were on the TV, I'd rather watch Brighton. And that's genuinely no bias, like no sense of bias in saying that, because City are obviously incredible. But I just think the way that De Zerbi plays football is, I think he could be the next Pep Guardiola. I think he's the next guy to revolutionise football. And I know that might be a bit of a statement to make, but I really, really do think he is the next guy in world football that everybody's going to want and everybody's going to want to replicate.
Well, Pep said that. Pep said they're the most exciting side when they played them last year. So I would agree with you as well. I think they're probably the most exciting team in the Premier League to watch.
Yeah, I do, like, lad, I really, really do stand by that. So on to our last team then of this episode, lads. Chelsea. The overriding comment that I have here is that Poch needs more time to get it right. Now, I have a feeling this is going to cause a little bit of a debate. That's why I left Chelsea to last. In my opinion, I believe he needs that time, because in terms of the underlying numbers of Chelsea, it's incredibly positive. Yes, they don't have the points on the board, but in terms of expected points, so that accumulates your XG, your possession ones, sort of stats like that there, and accumulates it and tries to gather you a point. In terms of their expected points, they should be 3rd in the league. So, Oren, I know you're not that you're not a fan of Poch as such, but you have been quite openly critical on this podcast of him. So what's your take on a point like that? Do you think he deserves more time, or do you think that Chelsea have made the wrong appointment here completely?
No, like I wouldn't say I'm critical necessarily of Poch's management style, because I do think he's a good manager. I just think his credibility as a manager is overhyped considering his honours. Do you know what I mean? But I think he was an absolutely fantastic appointment by Chelsea. But I'm very much of the opinion that I agree with you, Connor. He deserves the time, but at Chelsea Football Club, you do not get the time. And I genuinely think he's 3 or 4. I know there's expected points that should be 3rd, but based on their actual results, and if them results, even if they play well in the next 3 or 4 games, if there's 4 losses, he's gone. And that's just the Chelsea philosophy, in my humble opinion. I think that's what would happen. Not that he would deserve it. But what I have said about Chelsea in the past, and I said it when we talked about Chelsea and Spurs, and I made that it was my last opinion of the week. They've signed too many players. They've signed too many players for big fees, all in the same position. And to be 100% honest, when you look at their starting 11 on paper, it hasn't exactly improved. You know, Moises Caicedo has come in. Yes, he's going to improve the team eventually. They signed Romeo Lavia for 60 million. You know, he's not going to play over Moises Caicedo, who they signed for 115 million. It's just not how it works. Nodi Madueke isn't good enough to start in that right wing. He's a young player, and I don't disagree with Chelsea's signing of him, but he's not good enough to start just yet. Nicholas Jackson, I do think is good enough to start, and I do think he'll lead the line for Chelsea this season. But I just feel that they've signed too many players, and I don't necessarily think all of them were Poch's signings, and I think that's a big problem at Chelsea, that there is a huge influence from that new owner, Todd Bowley. And I think he looks at what other teams are looking for in a player, and then he just pops more money on and signs them. I don't necessarily think he knows a lot about football, and that could be a controversial statement, but I don't know. I don't know if he's a big football fan or whatever, but I don't know. I just think they've signed too many players for their own good, and I think that will be a real hindrance for them this season. Not to say that they don't have quality players, because they obviously do, but you can only put 11 players on the pitch at one time. And moulding all these players, we said with the likes, we used Caicedo as a prime example. They signed quite a lot of players when the Premier League already started. Those types of players should have been getting a pre-season under Pochettino for him to be fully implementing his style on that team, because it's not like Chelsea wouldn't spend the money. So I do think that they've signed players a bit too late, and I think that will hinder them for the first few weeks of the season especially. And we've seen that already, but I think that will carry on beyond the international break, because a lot of them were international players. So they still wouldn't have kind of got that 2 weeks with Pochettino there for him to mould his style of football on. So I think it'll be a slow start for Chelsea. I'm not saying that they won't end up with a European place, because it is very possible. It's within the realms of possibility. But I don't think it'll be smooth sailing for Chelsea this season.
Well, it is interesting because from what I've seen from Chelsea this season, I think Sterling's playing his best football in a Chelsea shirt. I think Poch has really, really got Sterling playing some of his best football, even on the ball and creatively. Sterling's doing things for Chelsea now that he wasn't necessarily doing at Manchester City, and I think he has adopted his game. Jackson's underlying numbers, I completely agree with you, Oren. I think he's good enough to lead the line. This is a player that I was very positive about over the summer, and I thought was a really, really good signing. Look, he has missed some big chances. There's no point in saying otherwise, and his underlying numbers are suggesting that there should be more goals to come from Nicholas Jackson. Caicedo, didn't get that time to bed in. Lavia. Look, I've seen a lot of Chelsea fans online, Connor, suggesting that Enzo Fernandez, Moises Caicedo and Romeo Lavia should be the midfield three when Lavia is fit. Does that disrupt the balance of the team, or do you think that's a nice combination in midfield that could push Chelsea on?
Well, they've spent the money on them, so I take it they're going to have to pay them. That's like nearly 300 million combined on the three of them. So
yeah.
They're going to have to play them. I understand what you're saying about Jackson. He is really good to watch, but his finishing isn't good enough. Against Forest, he should have scored. Against Liverpool, he missed countless chances. Against West Ham, he missed chances. I think we could have been looking at a different perspective of Chelsea if he could finish, because I watched the West Ham game and Chelsea were the better side. I thought Sterling, as you said, Connor, was unbelievable. I think this season he has been brilliant. And I don't know where it's come out of, because every game he's been really, really impressive. And, Chilwell, Reece James injured again. I do actually think Chelsea have a side that can get European football, but definitely results will start going their way. I do believe that. I think that actually watching them, you're like, this side isn't bad. Obviously, they've spent, I've seen they're worth nearly $1 billion, their squad. So obviously, they're going to have to be good eventually. But I think they just got to give Poch time. And I think even, they give Potter pilot time. He lost so many games and they just stuck with him for ages and ages. And then eventually, it was just, the time he had to go. They just lost so many games. But they got to stick with Poch. It is a number 9. They've spent so much money. And I do rate Jackson. I think he is a decent player, but his finishing's not up to standard. And to spend that much money and not to have an out-and-out striker that can finish is crazy. I've seen they're getting linked to Tony. I think that will be a good addition. I think that'll be a really good player for them to get. Maybe not the most glamorous name. That's the thing with Chelsea as well. They had like Lukaku, Higuain, by Aubameyang, Morata. All glamorous names didn't really perform. But I think if they could go out there and get a Tony who's going to get you nearly, I'd say he'd get, in that Chelsea side, 15, 20 goals a season at least. I think Chelsea aren't as far away as people think. And even Poch saying after matches, they were very unlucky. But that is the thing though, I'm saying these kind of things, but they've spent so much money. So to spend that much money, you'd expect a side to be challenging for the league, which they're not doing. And they are still a far, if you look at City, they're miles behind them still.
Yeah, look, I think that's a fair enough statement to make, to be honest, lads. I mean, for the money spent, to not have a number 9 that's guaranteed, to get you those 15, 20, 25 goals in the Premier League is almost criminal in itself. But look, I am of the opinion that Poch will get it right. I really, really rate Poch as a manager, and I do think that, given the correct time, Chelsea will be a much stronger side with Poch than if they sacked him. But look, that's going to do it for this week, folks. And just to give you a little update on the podcast's future. So we sort of sat down and we had a bit of a look at our analytics and what was doing well and what wasn't doing so well for us. And to be honest, guys, we've kind of come to the conclusion that these long form podcasts probably aren't the best way forward. All of our interactions on social media and all of our big interactions on social media are coming from a lot of short form content. Now, this is not us announcing that we're giving the podcast up or anything like that. That's the complete opposite. But what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be producing short form content videos from now on. We're going to have a bit of a trial run here for the next 3 months at creating content that's geared on YouTube and Spotify specifically to around the 10 to 15 minute mark. And then our socials are going to be absolutely littered with short reels or even shorter videos on specific topics within football. So what you might end up seeing eventually on the Bottom Bins podcast is, for talk's sake, rather than us running through every single Premier League game that week, Connor and Owen might jump on and do a quick review of the Manchester United game. Myself and Connor might jump on to do a quick review of the Liverpool game. Myself and Owen then might jump on and do a quick review of, say, Chelsea or West Ham or somebody. That's how we're going to gear our content from now on. And our content is going to primarily be centered around that sort of short form ideology. Or do you want to expand on it a wee bit more? I feel like you could probably give it more justice than I will.
Yeah, so just looking at the basic analytics of the channels, we're not seeing the growth that we're seeing. We're not seeing the growth in terms of our hour and a half or hour long podcast as we're seeing with our reels, our TikToks, our short form YouTube shorts. So we've just, me and Richie kind of sat down the other day and I explained all this, and I went to Prague there for like a journalism boot camp. And I spoke to a lot of professionals that are high up in the journalistic world, and I was speaking to them about the podcast, trying to get advice from them and stuff, and they all kind of suggested the same thing, that until the growth is there with the podcast, people don't really care about watching an hour-long podcast about football whenever there's thousands and thousands of other podcasts doing the exact same thing. And we upload on a Wednesday, so by then it is kind of old news as well, and we knew that as well. We came to that realization, but just with different schedules and stuff, that is the way it had to be for the three of us. But this new strategy that we're going to implement on a trial run, it's not that it's set in stone that this is the way the Bottom Bins is going to be for the future, but for a trial run over the next three or 4 months, we're going to try this short form content. It makes it a lot easier for us to produce content for you, because we're not, if it's only 10 or 15 minutes, it's not a whole pile of time out of our schedule, because it is very busy for us all now at the minute, that we're out of university. But this is content that'll come to you directly after a game or the day after a game, so it's fresh in your head. The game's fresh in your head. The content that we're going to be producing is so fresh. It's as if it's ink straight onto the paper. It's not even dried. Okay, so we think it'll be better for you, because you're getting our unbiased opinion straight away, rather than after having a week to dissect and other people dissecting it throughout the week, and us potentially taking on bias from other people's opinions. And we just think this strategy, in terms of growing the podcast and making the content, suited to each viewer, not necessarily somebody who is going to listen to an hour-long podcast. We were also looking at analytics in terms of the people who, in our views, in terms of time watched on our podcast, and it was very much around that 10 to 15 minute range. Some of the short form content that we had made before on our podcast, especially on YouTube, that's where we were seeing our highest views. So makes sense for us. We think it makes sense for the future, for the near future of the podcast, and we think it makes sense for our viewers as well. So yeah, for the next 3 or 4 months, it'll be short form content from the Bottom Bins.
Yeah, definitely. And look, guys, to those of you who do consistently sit down and watch our podcast, listen to us on Spotify, watch us on YouTube, we just want to say a massive thank you because, yeah, look, sometimes we do look at it and we go, oh, only 25 views over the two platforms this week. Whereas we're looking at our socials and we're like, oh, this TikTok video got 2.2k views, or oh, this TikTok video got 6.7k views. It makes more sense for us to aim at getting views and follows and trying to up those subscriber counts. And the best way to do that is through short form content at the minute, because a lot of people just don't really want to listen to an hour-long podcast. So look, if you are one of those loyal listeners who tunes in for the hour-long podcast every week, we don't want you to feel left out, which is why there's, rather than it being set as a 1 hour podcast, you're just going to get more content thrown at you, but it's just going to be a shorter listening span of time. But yes, look, thank you so much to everybody who listened to us. Thank you for all the support. Thanks for listening to this episode. And as always, keep it bottom bins.
Keep it bottom bins.
Keep bottom ends.